A few years ago, when I was 11, I was staying home alone with my little brother who was 7. At that time, it was about 9 p.m., dark and snowing, and we were reading in our rooms, getting ready to sleep for the night. To give some context for the layout of the house, my bedroom is directly to the left of the front door, and my brother's is directly to the right. Just as I was starting to doze off, I heard the front doorbell ring, followed by knocking. At first, I thought my parents had arrived, but it was strange that they didn't use the garage door or their keys to get in the house. I was a little creeped out, but mostly curious, so I got out of bed to look through the window that had a clear view of the driveway. I looked outside, expecting to see their car, but there was nothing but snow. As I approached the door, I heard a man's voice that was not my father's yelling from outside the door. "Would you like some cookies? We're selling Girl Scout cookies." I was shocked hearing this, considering the weather and the time of day. Saying nothing, I checked the peephole and peered through the side window, only to see that it was not a father with his girl as I expected. My heart dropped. Standing there was a fully grown man, maybe in his late 50s, with no box of cookies in sight. I can remember the gut-wrenching feeling of having to check the locks while he was right on the other side. He definitely heard this, since the 2 locks were the only thing separating myself and brother from a potential monster. He continued to knock and mention his cookies, as I considered calling the cops. That's when I remembered the blinds were open in my room where my brother was, with the light on. As I turned the corner into the doorway, I saw the man carefully peering into our window, eyeing my brother, who was distracted with his book. My heart was pounding now as I began to panic. In a move that took all of my willpower, I quickly turned off the lights and ran over to the window to close the blinds, in full view of the man. I double-checked all the locks in the house, closed all the blinds, and told my brother to go hang out in the walk-in closet upstairs since there weren't any windows. I called my mom, who was obviously horrified after hearing about the situation. She called the police and told me to wait inside the closet with my brother. The police finally arrived and searched the entire property. They found footprints in the snow near every door leading inside the house. The footprints led them back to the woods behind our house where they eventually lost them after reaching a main road. Ever since that night, my parents have been extra cautious when my brother and I are around adults, since it was almost like the person knew my parents wouldn't be home. They fear that it was someone we knew, but we still haven't found out who it was to this day. Just thinking about it still gives me shivers. I don't even like to think about what could have happened to us. I'll start by saying that nothing could have prepared me for what I was going to discover the morning after a night out. It started off as every other night would. My family and I were getting ready to head up to a local bar for a fundraising event. I had just turned 18 and was looking to have a chill night with friends and family. I knew most of the people there, so I was feeling really relaxed. While at the bar, I went to pay for my drink when the bartender told me it was already paid for. When I went to see who had paid for it, I saw my cousin's partner. He's about a decade older than me, give or take. I gave him a quick wave, and we did the normal niceties like, "Hi, how are you doing?" It's important to note that I'd barely spoken more than 2 words to him before, as he was usually quiet, or retreated to his room when we would go and visit my cousin. After saying thank you, I thought nothing of it. Nothing seemed off with our little interaction. By the end of the night, I had gathered my family together and told them I wanted to head home. At this point in time, I was still living at home with my mother. She had made plans to stay at my grandmother's house that night, so I was going to go home and sleep. Around 11:30 p.m., I went outside for a smoke before driving home. Just as I was about to head to my car, I heard someone call my name, so I turned to find my cousin's partner walking towards me. He asked if I was about to head home, which I immediately thought was weird. I told him that it was late and that I was calling it a night. Without skipping a beat, he mentioned the car that I drive and said he would see me around sometime. At this point, I got a bit creeped out, so I said goodnight and walked off to my car. There were plenty of people outside, so I wasn't necessarily concerned, but definitely uncomfortable. Once I got in the car, my phone started ringing and I looked to see that it was my mother. She was begging and pleading with me to go and stay at my grandmother's house for the night with her, saying that she had a really bad feeling. Initially, I was really annoyed. I just wanted to go home and go to sleep in my own bed, but she insisted. I couldn't understand why. I was used to being home alone at night, but she wouldn't let it go. I hung up and started driving home. I couldn't be bothered going to my grandma's when my house was just down the road. I was tired, and the only place I wanted to be was home. Not even halfway home, my phone went off again, so I pulled over to check it. It was my sister asking me to please go stay at my grandma's house. I was pissed off at this point and decided it would be easier going to my grandma's house instead of arguing with my family. When I got to my grandma's house, everyone was asleep. Now I was really pissed off, so I went straight to sleep. The night was uneventful, but I woke in the morning to my family talking about how they all had a feeling of dread, which is why they didn't want me to go home alone that night. My mother and I left to go home around lunchtime. As soon as we pulled in the driveway, I instantly felt off. Once I got to the door, I found a police card wedged into the door to call them as soon as possible. I went inside and found my mother's camera on the kitchen table. This was a huge red flag, considering it was in my bedroom before we left the house for the fundraiser. I went to my room, only to find that my entire room had been ransacked. No other room in the house had been touched. My blankets had been pulled back, and it looked like someone had been in my bed. My drawers were wide open, and my underwear was sprawled on the floor. Another one of my mother's cameras was also on the table where my TV was, which was directly opposite to my bed. By this point, my heart was pounding and my mind was racing. If I had gone home, like the plan all along, I would have made my way through the house and then crawled into bed without switching my lamp on. I'd done this so many times previously, and I wouldn't have seen the state of my room at all. My mother gave the police a call to find out what happened, and what she told them made the blood drain from my face. Police were alerted to a break-in at our next-door neighbor's house when our neighbors found a man wandering inside their house. The man claimed that he was my friend and went into the wrong house. They chased him out. Our house had a big 8x12 meter deck which looked over my neighbor's house. They called the police again when they spotted the same man smoking on our backyard deck. The police arrived at our house at 2 a.m., but since I wasn't home, no one answered the door. They noticed the lights were on, so they went inside through the back door which was left unlocked to investigate. They made their way through the house and found a man hiding in the bedroom in the dark. He couldn't give a reason why he was there or why he was hiding in my room. They arrested him and took him to the station, since they wanted to know if we knew him. Well, it turns out it was my cousin's partner, and he'd been hiding in my bedroom for over an hour waiting for me to get back because he knew I'd be going home that night. To this day, my mother and sister still can't explain how or why they knew I shouldn't go home. Whether it was a total coincidence or not, my mother's gut feeling saved me from going home alone that night. Ever since that night, I never question my mother when she has a bad feeling about something. Who knows what would have happened to me? He was charged with breaking and entering and spent some time in jail before being released and leaving the country. Although it doesn't seem like it, this happened quite a while back. I was in the later years of high school and was home alone for the night. My parents were at a wedding that required them to stay at a hotel, and my brother worked the night shift. At that time, my family lived in a very well-known East Coast city in a blue-collar neighborhood that was starting to take a nosedive. As a teenager, I was a bit of a loner. I wasn't a nerd or anything. I was a bigger dude who had friends and went on dates, but I'm a natural introvert, so I cherished the rare alone time that I got. On that particular weekend, I was looking forward to engaging in my normal empty house routine. My plan was to play some PlayStation on the big screen TV, then order a late takeout dinner like pizza and pig out while watching TV. Cecil was a beagle who was old as the hills and had been in our family for about 8 years. He was quiet and peaceful and spent his time begging for food and sleeping. Unlike most beagles, Cecil never howled or barked. He was more than content to rest his head on your lap and spend the night there. Around 1 a.m., I had just finished the last slice of pizza and was dozing off on the couch when I heard a bang coming from the back alleyway. It didn't really startle me, since it wasn't out of the ordinary. Anyone who has lived in a city would know that random noises could be heard at any time of the night. Cecil's head popped up off my lap and the hair on his back stood up. He was always a bit skittish, so I calmed him down and started dozing off again. Not more than 2 minutes later, I heard another bang, and Cecil did something I'd never seen him do before. He leapt off the couch and ran like the wind towards the door leading to the basement, barking and growling like a dog twice his size. The look on his face reminded me of a German Shepherd police dog. I'd never seen him like that before, which got my adrenaline pumping. Through the dog's barking, I could now make out a persistent banging. There was a seldom used door in the basement that led to our back alleyway. It was old and rusted, and was hard to open, even with the key, and it made a lot of noise. I suddenly realized that someone was trying to break into my house through my basement door. This is one thing I've learned from living in a bad neighborhood. If someone tries to get into your house and moves on after they realize the door is locked, they want your stuff. If someone is persistently trying to get into your house despite your door being locked, well, they want you. Knowing this, I rushed upstairs to grab the heavy wooden baseball bat that I kept under my bed for situations like this. Then, I headed down to the basement. I probably should have ran, but I was a macho teenager with a tough guy complex, and plus, I had nowhere to go. While I was heading down the stairs to my basement, Cecil blew past me with the speed and aggression of a dog half his age. Suddenly, I heard a man's voice yell out in fear, and the banging stopped on the other side of the door. Since he never actually broke in, I didn't call the cops or anyone else, which was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. I just sat up for the rest of the night with the bat in my hand. My brother came home that morning, and I told him what had happened. We went to the basement door to take a look, and when we gave it a tug to open it, the whole door fell off. The psycho was one good shove away from getting into my house, but old Cecil scared him off. I'm pretty sure that lazy fat old dog saved my life. When I tell this story to people, they dismiss his actions as a dog doing what a dog was supposed to do. But when I tell you that Cecil never barked or moved that fast in his life, you can take that to the bank. It was almost like he knew the urgency, like he knew the door was going to give. A few years back, we had to have him put down because he just had no will to live anymore. Before the injection, I got a moment of alone time with him. I thanked him one last time for his friendship and for what he did that night. At this point, I was a grown man with a wife and kids. I'm convinced none of that would have happened without old Cecil. Thanks, pal. I miss you.